The whole purpose of our evening tonight was to emphasize to liberal arts students that the liberal arts community really is here to support you in this stressful time and help you with thinking about how to navigate this time in terms of your career development. We also wanted to facilitate that connection between students and liberal arts alumni. We also know that that's sometimes one of those questions that people have. We talk about the alumni network at Penn State quite a lot, and it is very strong and large and powerful, but I'm not sure that students always know how to tap into that. And so we are very lucky to have a few alumni and one of our faculty here with us tonight to share some insights and perspectives and answer your questions, and maybe just serve as a jumping off point for how you can connect with our liberal arts community. So we have three panelists here tonight, and I'm going to do some brief introductions of them and then give them a little bit of time to introduce themselves. And then we do have some questions that were shared with us prior to the session. So we'll start out our conversation with those questions, but you also have the chance to add any questions that you would like to pose to any of the panelists or to any of the network staff. So we'll be managing those questions and then sharing some resources, as I said, with you at the end. So our panelists for this evening, James Tierney, who's a Penn State economics faculty member and a founding member of Happy Valley Improv. So he's also got his own small business experience that he can share. Wendy Stoner, who's the former director for emerging talent development in the Office of Human Resource Management for the U.S. General Services Administration. And Dr. Vince Culotta, who's the founder and president of Neurobehavioral Associates, which is a Maryland-based neuropsychology practice that serves children, adolescents, and adults. So James, would you like to kick it off with a short introduction of yourself?
My name is James Tierney. I'm completing my 6th year here at Penn State as the faculty, as one of the teaching faculty in the economics department. I'm currently, and every semester since I've been here, taught macroeconomics. And of course, this semester has been the craziest, not just because of going to the emergency remote teaching, but because of the macroeconomic state. The economy has been rather stable in historical terms over the last 6 years. So it's very interesting time for me. So I moved, like I said, I moved here 6 years ago, very much enjoying the liberal arts, doing a lot of work with the network and everything. So I'm really glad to be here.
Wendy?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Wendy Stoner, and I work for a federal government agency in Washington, D.C., and it's called the U.S. General Services Administration. And I can echo what James just said. Things are different for all of us, so you're not alone. Many of us, including me and my agency, we're all working from home, and these times have really, impacted us, and, we're having to be resourceful and to figure out how to work remotely and use a lot of the tools and technology that are available to many companies. And the federal government is slowly getting in the 21st century. And I'm pleased that I work for an agency that had lots of, forward thinking around this. So we've been pretty successful in working from home during this time. But I would be happy to answer any questions you have later this evening. And thank you again for joining us.
And Vince.
Hi guys, my name is Vince Culotta. I'm a neuropsychologist in the Baltimore, Washington area. I've been practicing about 30 years, so that's a long time. I graduated from Penn State in '81. I have a daughter who talked me into a really nice apartment called the Metropolitan this year. And it's sitting empty right now. And they're still sending me parking bills. I have another daughter who graduated a couple of years ago. So I have a professional relationship, obviously, with COVID in terms of stress in our clients and stress in our practice. And I get to see it personally from my home. So that's a lot of COVID. We look forward to providing some resources for you and answering some of your questions.
Great. So we wanted to kick this off tonight. We have a question for each of our panelists before we dive into the questions that were submitted to us previously. And so I'm going to start off with James. James, how will the economic impact of the coronavirus affect students?
Well, I think we have to think about the two different ways that it will affect students, both in the short run and in the long run. Now, if we're talking about students that are just about, they're getting ready to enter the job market, we are definitely in a recession right now. And by definition, a recession is when production and employment are going down. We've had over 10 million initial claims for unemployment over the last 3 weeks. So we're definitely seeing unemployment go up. What that's going to mean for trying to find a job right out of undergrad is going to be a little difficult. There's no easy way to put that. Firms are not hiring. I mean, we know right at Penn State, we're not hiring. Different departments have been on hiring freezes. So it's going to be difficult. So I think students need to rely heavily on their networks and rely heavily on making sure that they're reaching out to places like the Liberal Arts Network and the Alumni Association and see what is out there. For students who aren't looking for a job right away, making sure that they're updating skills that will be needed whenever they are going to be out on the market is very important. And also, saving money where you can and making sure that you are ready for if you do need to spend extra time than what you were planning on when looking for that job. That's going to be, the most difficult part. Right now, the economy's been going so well for, for a decade, basically. The economy's been going very well since 2009, 2010. It's been a slow recovery, but it has been a recovery. So a lot of students that I've been talking to, they get a job offer. They're like, well, I'm going to take a couple of months and I'm going to spend it traveling and do this and do that. And a lot of those plans might have to be on hold and think more when I graduated in undergrad in 2008, where that wasn't thought of. It was, okay, I just need to find a job somewhere. And I wish that I had good news. I wish I could come here and say, oh, in a couple months, it's going to be fine. But, the rehiring process is going to take some time. And those individuals with skills and experience are going to be the ones that'll be rehired back first. And then until the uncertainty is gone, businesses are going to be a little hesitant about making new positions and hiring into this type of economy. We see unemployment and employment as what we call a lagging indicator, meaning that it doesn't bottom out until after the recession has started, because we hold on to our workers. We're not sure how bad it's going to be. And then it also doesn't peak until after we've come out of it, because the first few months and maybe, a quarter or two after the economy starts to rebound is when firms feel confident enough to start rehiring. So students can expect to take a little longer than usual in finding the position, and it's probably going to have to cast their net a little wider. If I'm definitely going to work in the city, maybe think about taking your first job, outside of the city, just really using those networks. So I wish I could bring you better news. But
no, I think that's really helpful. And part of the session tonight, the intention is to be realistic with students and help you to think about, there's so much that we can't control right now, but to help you think about the things that you can control and the things, the actions that you can take. So for Wendy, maybe a little bit along the lines of some of the things that James touched on, but what kinds of suggestions do you have for students of things that they can do right now to continue moving their career development forward?
Well, that's a great question. And I will definitely piggyback on some of the things that James said for sure. But first of all, I want to let everybody know that the federal government is hiring. So other sectors of the economy may not be hiring and recruiting right now, but the federal government is. And so if you're a senior or you've already graduated and you're looking for employment, definitely check out usajobs.gov and you might be able to find yourself a position. So just wanted to put that plug in. So I've spent a lot of my career recruiting entry-level talent, recent college grads for leadership development programs that I've run at GSA. And one of the things that I always look for is well-roundedness. So what better time than now when you have all this free time on your hands because you can't go to the gym or do other fun things with your friends. I would encourage you to take advantage of this extra time that you have right now to, build on your skill set, whether it be something that you're already good at and you want to hone those skills even more, or maybe it's something that, you've been thinking you need to work on, or, maybe a professor has pointed out, that you need to work on, let's say, writing skills or public speaking. I would encourage you to check out lots of free opportunities opportunities online to gain experience and practice, or to take a course on a skill set or an area that you really want to work on. So at the end of the day, I think employers, when you do get out there and you start looking for a job, they're going to want to see, did you use your time wisely? And, you know, maybe you weren't able to be employed during this period of time while we're dealing with this sort of national emergency, but you can still be resourceful and you can still take advantage of the time wisely. And so I think if you can show that, you know, or if you volunteered, maybe you learned or developed some skills from that kind of experience, but being able to put something on your resume that shows that, you know, you built upon, you know, something that you were already working on and were able to supplement your resume with some kind of skill set, I think is very important. I'd like to put a plug in for the Liberal Arts College Mentor Program. For sure, I have been a mentor in the program for a number of years. I think Vince, who you're going to hear from in a moment, has as well. And I just think it's a great opportunity to network with alumni. So that's something else. I'll piggyback on what James said. Networking is critical in the business world and for developing relationships, because you never know where you're going to be able to find employment opportunities. And it just takes that one connection to learn about something or learn about an opportunity at a company, you know, through a variety of networks, through the Alumni Association, through former employers, through your professors. You know, there's lots of folks. I mean, obviously the Career Enrichment Network, you know, can connect you with people as well. So again, I want to emphasize that you should utilize your network during this time to, you know, let folks know, you know, what you're looking for and, you know, when you may be looking, because the more people who are out there sort of, you know, with their eyes open and looking out for you, you know, something will definitely come along. I would also encourage you to take advantage of Penn State's career services. I think so often, having been a recruiter and realizing how infrequently students actually take advantage of the resources that career services offers. And it's certainly not just at Penn State. I would hear this at many universities that I recruited at. So, you know, taking advantage of resume writing, interviews, you might even want to practice with your friends, doing some mock interviews. Again, a great way to sort of utilize your time to practice so that you'll be ready, you know, once the economy really does open up again. So definitely check out what career services offers. And lastly, again, I just want to let you know that, you know, we're all dealing with, you know, this change right now, and it's normal to feel, you know, sort of different. And Vince, I guess, is going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But, you know, again, you know, we're all missing our normal activities or our normal routines. But I think, you know, if you can focus on, you know, a few things that you'd like to get accomplished every day or every week, especially in the realm of career development, I think, you know, you'll feel like you really accomplished something when this is all over. So thank you.
Great, thanks. And Vince, could you share some tips on how to manage stress levels during this time where we're isolated and there's a lot of uncertainty and people are trying to navigate a really unexpected and unprecedented, that word used a lot these days, situation?
Sure, and I think unprecedented is a good word. To start, I'm going to offer a quick plug for the Career Enrichment Network. Susan and her staff and Chris Gamble. I remember when I was a liberal arts major, I would see people dressed in suits, and I wondered, why would a student be in a suit? And I was always told, well, he's an engineering major or he's a business major. And I thought, well, I've never seen liberal arts people in suits. Do we not have interviews? So use your network. My first thought was, let's define what the stressor is. We know it's a health stressor, but I think for students, it's a loss of community. I think college is a communal environment. Your friends, your peers, your favorite place to eat, access to faculty like James and TAs. I think my daughters miss the community of college probably more than anything. I think the second stressor is moving back home. I mean, what wasn't the whole point of college to get out of the house? I mean, that's not why we went in the first place. So I think it's tough. And establishing a rhythm at home, you know, when my daughters came home about a month ago, I would get up at 8 in the morning and I would say it's 8:03 and my daughters aren't awake yet. And it's 8:07 and my daughters aren't awake yet. And my wife finally said, chill out. They'll figure it out. They established a sleep cycle. Not my sleep cycle. They stay up till about 2 in the morning. They get up at about 9:30 or 10, but it seems to work for them. And I think the last stressor is what James and Wendy both were alluding to, which is the uncertainties about our future. There's an upside to this. Between 18 and 22, your bodies and your brains are literally built for stress. You have more resilience, neurological plasticity, and capacity to adapt to the novelty, certainly than me and than many other folks. And so novelty, and COVID is clearly novel, actually builds neurobiological capital in the brain. And so that's a really interesting advantage. And I wouldn't look over that. Two ways that stress affect us cognitively. We ruminate, we worry, we get restless, we get edgy, we get temperamental, we overreact to minor frustrations, and many times we can't even identify the frustrations. Physically, two reactions. The first is a release of epinephrine, which gives us that fight or flight stance, but that's fairly rapid and then settles down. The second response of the body is to raise cortisol levels. Now, cortisol is a hormone, and at first it helps us use energy well, it helps us process food well, it helps us establish our sleep. But over time, cortisol impairs our receptivity to insulin, which gives us carbohydrate cravings. So sometimes weight and appetite can be an issue. Cortisol can be harmful to neural networks in the brain. So finding a strategy to manage stress, I think, is really important. Let's talk about two categories of strategies. I think the first are general strategies: sleep, appetite, and exercise. They sound trite and recognizable to all of us, but probably 75% of our stress management can be done by establishing a reasonable sleep cycle. At 18 to 22, you still need about 8 to 9 hours a night. Establishing a diet that's rich in foods that help your immune system, and exercise. We've been walking a lot with my daughters and my wife and I. I know it's hard to get to the gym. My wife called me today and said she ran 8 miles on a treadmill. That's not my thing, but she did it. Find ways to get active. Establish a daily routine. I think Wendy alluded to that. Set some goals, short-term goals, day-to-day, longer-term goals for the week. Find a way to manage your goals. On the resource list, you'll see a couple of apps. One's called Hebatica. It's like an RPG. It's like a game where you establish a contract with yourself and set some goals, and you're rewarded, as you do in many games, for achieving those goals. I think if your stress level reaches the point of anxiety, and by anxiety I mean difficulty really controlling rumination, irritability to the point where you're really unhealthy, sleep difficulties, any repetitive behaviors, you probably should consult someone. Most psychologists, physicians are available via telehealth. There are a number of mechanisms to pay for telehealth now in your insurance policies, so I would look at that. And let me end on just one point. In preparation for this, we were speaking a few days ago, and James mentioned something about 9/11, our terrorist attacks several years ago. After those attacks, our society experienced a lot of fear. And psychologists did some studies, and one of the things they found in those studies was that we changed our values a little bit. We tended to value safety and security much more than the need for accomplishment and goal setting and success. And that change in values, certainly necessitated by fear, may not always be healthy. I'll throw in one Sigmund Freud quote. Freud used to say that in times of stress, we're prone to substitute fairly large measures of happiness for fairly small measures of security. And he felt that we never really achieve any kind of authentic happiness by doing that. So I would maintain your goals, take reasonable risks, set expectations for yourself, and find an alternative path. I think that's what we're all being asked to do right now.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
As I mentioned, we had some questions that were submitted to us in advance, but please also feel free to put any questions into the Q&A as well, and we'll just go through the list here. So I think this one could really be for any of you, but Wendy, with your recruiting experience, it might be something you have some thoughts on. So with remote learning and social distancing measures lasting through the summer, students will likely have more free time alone. Other than taking remote courses for credit, what opportunities or experiences do you recommend we engage in over the summer to help us stand out for future job searches or grad school applications? And then there were some kind of options underneath this. Certifications or skills that are generally desirable across most fields, for example, coding, Microsoft Office Suite, etc. GRE grad school test prep, or internships, can they be done remotely, and is it too late to apply?
Okay, those are a lot of questions. So first of all, I would say it's probably not too late to apply for some internships. I know at GSA, again, and the government might be a little bit unique, but we are going to continue with the planned internship that we hired quite a few folks to do over the summertime, and they will get a laptop, and if we are still not back in the office on a regular basis, they will do that remotely. So you might want to just check out different job sites to see if there might be some employers that are still hiring interns. And even if I'm not a huge fan of unpaid internships personally, but even if there are some unpaid opportunities, I mean, if you're going to be at home and you could really hone a skill or, get some experience in a field that might interest you, there might be opportunities. And again, using your network, you might even, if there's something that you feel you could offer a company, maybe you could offer a few hours a week and donate some time or volunteer some time, again, because you would get that experience and that connection with a company. So that would be one thing I would suggest. Can you repeat what some of the other parts of that question were?
Yeah, so one of the things I think the student is looking for is any advice on particular skills or certifications that are generally desirable across most fields. I would say, just from my perspective in working with students and reviewing resumes, one of the things that I see, some students are, even with something as simple as Microsoft Word, some students are very accomplished with Word and some not so accomplished. So I always encourage students to look to LinkedIn Learning to polish up your skills on those. People don't know how to do tabs, or they don't know how to do formatting. I know for me, one of my goals at some point in the near future is to learn how to use pivot tables in Excel. I can do some basic things in Excel, but I don't know how to use pivot tables. So I'm going to use LinkedIn Learning to find that. But are there any other specific skills or certifications that come to mind for any of you that you would encourage students to be trying to work on?
I would just chime in to add to that. Honing analytical skills, and whether that be analyzing data or large data sets using Excel, that's absolutely something that many companies are looking for folks to be able to do across lots of career paths. Public speaking is always important. I personally really look for good writing skills because they're so few and far between these days. So, really being able to put your thoughts down and write a good business memo, or to be concise. So I think, good writing skills, business writing skills are important. And then just general communications. These are, I think, cross occupational talents or skills that any employer is going to be looking for, especially at the entry level. But I'll let others add to that.
I would mention we have an internship in the summer for psych students, and I think we're going to try to postpone it to a little later in the summer. But even if we have to do it virtually, I think students can still write and submit research posters and projects to national conferences. So you get a citation and a presentation, which builds your attractiveness to graduate programs. So I wouldn't hesitate to call internship sites and ask if there's opportunities to do work offline. We have a couple of students right now that are preparing some projects for a conference that'll be in Chicago in November, and we hope they'll be able to attend it then. But I think that's a good resume strengthener. I also think blogging, 400 or 500 word blog is great for your writing skills. It's not too painful. You can publish it or not publish it. So that's a good skill builder.
Yeah, I'll do one technical thing, which would be Tableau. So Tableau to be able to display that data, and companies, yeah, they want the analytic skills for sure, but now everybody is doing exactly what you're talking about. They're figuring out the Excel, and they're getting better with big data. So I like to tell my students, always try and think one iteration ahead of what people might not be thinking of. And I know in the economics department, we've been using Tableau a lot more to try and get students to stand out with that. I'm going to double down on the communications part. And as you know, I do improv theater, and I've told my students all the time that you should take some sort of theater class when you're an undergrad, just to help you get over those anxieties of public speaking. And right now across the country, I'm sure in your hometown, here in State College, everywhere, there are lots of small theaters that are scrambling to find enough revenue to keep their small business going. And they're offering, small classes on, intro to acting or intro to speaking or intro to Zoom improv, a ton of different stuff that you can look into at this time. One last thing I'll mention, which is very similar to what Vince said, I would, if you do have an internship plan for the summer, because I've had multiple students reach out to me and say, what should I do? I have this internship that I set up. It's supposed to start in June, and I haven't really heard much about it. I would reach out and ask what you can do now. So the first internship I got, I remember emailing and being like, hey, I'm not used to mutual funds. Is there anything I can do? And, the boss was like, his name is Peter, was like, oh, here's some things you can read to get ready for it. And later on, he told me how appreciative it was that I took the initiative to reach out. Now, 100% honest, I was so scared for that first internship that I needed to figure out what to do beforehand. But from him, he thought I was like, oh, I'm up front and initiating a conversation, which is fine. I didn't let him believe that.
Nothing like fear.
Exactly. I would reach out. And say, hey, I understand things are uncertain, both for your company and for me as well. I would love to continue this internship. And is there anything that I can do right now to be prepared for it? Is there anything I can do remotely to make sure that I have the best experience and that you have the best experience from me? Because again, not a lot of people will be doing that, and that'll set you apart from the other interns who aren't going to reach out to their future supervisors.
Absolutely. All great advice. One other thing that I'll just add to the mix, because you heard from everyone that the communication skills are so important. And I know that sometimes right now it might be difficult to figure out how to continue building those skills. And we did have a session that was done for us by someone a few weeks ago on the gig economy. And there are a number of sites now, like Upwork, for example, that you can do smaller projects. So maybe if that internship that you thought you had lined up has now been canceled, looking for ways that you can still get some experience on maybe some smaller projects, that might be a good way to do it. And if you need to find that Upwork or that gig economy presentation, it should be posted out on our social media, but you can get in contact with anyone in our office and we'll connect you with it. Okay, so on to the next. Vince, I think this one seems more directed at you. So over the past few years, it seems like there have been many articles about Gen Z and high levels of mental health issues and stress, sometimes attributed to social media or other factors. Could COVID-19 have any long-term positive or negative mental health effects for Gen Z?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was at UCLA about a month ago to do a lecture on anxiety, assessing anxiety. The anxiety rates have gone up substantially in Gen Z. And in my practice, I see it on a routine basis. The anxiety diagnosis, the use of SSRIs, the use of substances as a response to anxiety. So I think, I'm not sure what's driving that. I mean, I don't know if it's our generation pushing or Gen Z pushing themselves upward, but it's certainly concerning. I think COVID could exacerbate that. I think if you're someone who is sort of below a diagnostic threshold with anxiety, COVID could push that through. And that's why I think considering some treatment, if that happens, is really important. Could there be an advantage? Yeah, I mean, I think it does build resiliency to manage the degree of novelty and stress that we're going through. So to reach that long-term advantage, you've got to get through the next couple of months and maybe the next couple of years.
All right. So we have a question from one of our participants. How do you recommend expanding your professional network while working and studying remotely?
I'll take a stab. The first thing I would do is really make sure that your LinkedIn page is, as boring as it may seem, right? Like LinkedIn is my most boring social media. Like I'm guessing that's most people's most boring social media. As boring as it is, like keep that updated and, comment on people's activity that you know. If you see one of your classmates got an internship or a job, congratulate them. Because I see all the time where, just going on, someone says, oh, congratulations, that seems like a neat position. And the response underneath it is, my supervisor says we're trying to find a second person. I was wondering if you would be interested. And so there's a lot of networking that can go on virtually through LinkedIn. So I would make sure that your LinkedIn page is up to date. And I know that the Career Enrichment Network can help with that. And there's a ton of YouTube videos that will just like show best practices. So that's where I would start. And I'm sure the other panelists will have some good advice too.
I'm just going to second that. It is the most boring and most important.
Exactly.
And LinkedIn today sent me a link and said, I follow you, but I've never reached out to you as a scientist at NIH. And he said, I thought I'd take this opportunity since I'm not meeting new people to say hello. And he introduced himself and we had a short conversation and I found out a lot of interesting things. So I really like the LinkedIn idea. I think that's important.
And I'll just add, if there are any groups like via LinkedIn or, other university clubs or organizations that you can connect with, regardless of what the topic is, you can always, networking with people that comes in all shapes and sizes. I mean, it really, because at the end of the day, you never know who knows somebody and who knows someone who's looking for someone who aligns with what you're looking for. So I would encourage you to, broaden your sort of landscape while you're at home.
Submit an application to the mentor program. It's hanging out and not doing much. Fill out the application, read a little bit about it. It's been a lot of fun working with that program over the years, and I've seen a lot of students go on and do some great stuff.
And I would second, I think LinkedIn can be a great resource. And if you're a little bit intimidated by it and you're not sure how to use it to identify potential people to reach out to, just contact somebody in the Career Enrichment Network. We're happy to walk you through that. It's got some really cool features. You can follow organizations that are interesting to you. You can join the Penn State Alumni Association, and we can give you some tips on how to identify people that you might want to reach out to. Maybe you want to target your initial outreach to young alumni and somebody who's been through the job search process recently. So please seek help for that if you're not exactly sure how to use it to the best benefit. Another one that's a little bit related to the alumni question, is there a way that students can practice interview skills with alumni?
Sure. I mean, I think, that's an interesting opportunity, Sue, maybe to set up through Career Enrichment Network is alumni that are willing to do mock interviews while I think we're all getting comfortable with Zoom and Doxy and some of the other, video formats. Maybe just reaching out to our network and asking who might be willing to take a half hour and do that.
Mm-hmm. And I would encourage students, you can certainly reach out to alumni through LinkedIn. You can reach out to alumni through LionLink, which is a platform that's managed by Alumni Career Services and the Alumni Association. Certainly, if you're in the Alumni Mentor Program, you would be able to do a practice interview with your mentor, and maybe your mentor can connect you with someone else that you could do that with as well. So I think there are lots of avenues for that. The other thing I encourage students to think about is not just alumni, but also connecting with your peers. So James mentioned, if someone's maybe got an internship that you're interested in, making sure that you're networking with your fellow students as well, who are maybe a year or two ahead of you and have some great advice and very timely experience with the recruitment process.
Can I ask James a question? Yeah. If I were 20 or 21, is there anything I should think about doing if I had a little bit of resources right now that might bear some fruit in the future?
Well, I think I'll tell you what I tell all my students is that if I could tell the future with investments, I'd probably not live in state college. I mean, I do believe that, those of us that are at a stage where we're not going to be retiring for another 30 years that these ups and downs are going to happen. So to stay the course, I'm always a big proponent of throwing any extra resources into a Vanguard mutual fund with super, super low fees that just tracks the S&P, because, lots of studies show that paying big fees for big people to pick your stocks for you is no better than just throwing it into something that will, just track like the S&P. With that being said, personally, I'm just continuing to put into the retirement account the way that I have been. I am taking advantage of, so I know there's some recent graduates that might be in here. The government has suspended the collection of student loan payments,
Right.
and it's in forbearance without any interest that is being earned on it. So you're not getting penalized for not paying it until September 30th. So you should take that money that you would be paying and put it towards other things that may not be in forbearance. For example, my wife and I have a couple of federal loans for our schooling that are in forbearance, but our private loan is not. So we're taking all the money that we would have been putting towards the federal payment and throwing it all towards the private one. So that way we'll, save some interest there.
Can student loans be refinanced?
Student loans can be refinanced, but I would be very hesitant to push students towards refinancing student loans because you lose some of the benefits. So, for example, if we would have refinanced our federal loans into a private place, we wouldn't be eligible for this forbearance. So there are some benefits of having those student loans with the government and held that way. But you might want to refinance your house if you had that recently. I just purchased a house, and so our mortgage rate is low enough that refinancing wouldn't do much. But if you or your family, or someone who has purchased a house, let's say 5 or 10 years ago, when interest rates were a little higher, like they're historically low right now. They're not going up anytime soon. So,
Good. Thank you.
So this one might be something, Wendy, that you could speak to, since GSA, you mentioned, has been kind of on the forefront of telework. How do you think corporations will treat working from home after this? And do you think there will be a shift in how we work?
I do. I definitely think for the foreseeable future, because if you're following the headlines and the medical personnel, basically they're saying that, we're going to really need to continue to practice social distancing and not really going back to our normal lives until probably a vaccine comes out. So absolutely. I am hoping that for companies and organizations that looked at telework and virtual working as, with some trepidation and maybe were a little untrusting of how that might work, will evolve through this period. I definitely think that companies are realizing that, if the choice is to have my folks working remotely or not working at all, obviously it's to the company's benefit to have them working. So I do think that, this probably has spurred on sort of the progress towards, more companies working remotely. But I think a lot we're already doing that as well. They recognize that owning lots of real estate and consuming lots of, energy in buildings that we don't necessarily need to go to accomplish what we do was necessary. So the agency I work for as the federal landlord realized that, about 10 years ago, and has really been reducing space. However, it will be difficult for us to go back because we sit in, open space right next to each other. And so that obviously won't be conducive for social distancing. So I do think that, students now can expect to probably work for a company, that will be doing a lot more remote working in the future.
All right. So Vince, this one I think is a good question for you. I understand that the university has had to make some tough decisions around moving to online courses, closing campus events, and moving to virtual commencement. However, I'm still disappointed that I will not get to experience these events this year. How do I reconcile this feeling of understanding and disappointment? Do you have suggestions for ways to find closure for graduating seniors?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. I've noticed in our hometown, people are putting signs in front of their homes if they have a senior about to graduate. I don't think we've quite found a way to meet that need for accomplishment and, when we're with people virtually yet. So I don't have a very good answer for that question yet in terms of closure. And, I think we like something about human contact, whether it's sitting at a game or at an improv club or even in our work setting. And I think we're going to have to find some new ways to do that. I'm a little bit concerned about that. And I hear that in my own children, will I graduate? Will I go to a football game this fall? Will I spend time with my friends? Not sure that we have a good solution for that yet.
I do think it's important for students to understand that they're not alone going through those feelings. I'm currently I'll talk about the writing as well. I want to become a better writer, so I'm doing a lot of blogging, and one of the things I'm working on right now is writing a letter to students that I won't be able to, say goodbye to. Which, is one of the reasons why we get into teaching. And, since I've been here long enough now that I have students that have gone from, sitting in my intro level class as a first semester freshman who has no idea what's going on to, getting all the way through and doing internships at, the Federal Reserve, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, I've seen them grow up for these 4 years, and then not knowing that, I would never get to really go to that graduation or say goodbye. That weighs on me as well. So I think it's the question asks the 100% what I've been struggling with, and I think a lot of people are struggling with, is that it's okay to have the feelings of disappointment and anger and I can't believe this is happening, but also have that feeling of understanding and knowing why these tough decisions are being made. Those aren't mutually exclusive events. You don't have to either be okay with it or be struggling with it. I think you can understand both of those and just know that you're not alone.
Those are really good points. I mean, grief comes from loss, and this is a loss. And there'll be a period of bereavement where we go through the loss of our graduation, of those activities that we looked forward to. Sometimes writing about them might be helpful, but I like the idea of writing a letter, James. I think that's a nice idea.
And I can say from my perspective, this has always been, it's the most fun time of the year, right? You get to talk to students who are moving on to the next stage of their lives. And sometimes they're really sad about that. Sometimes they're very excited about it. Sometimes they're both all at once. And it's always just really rewarding, I think, for me and my colleagues who do this kind of work to see students going off on their first internship, all of that. So I do feel like we're missing something, but I also want to encourage students to think about how can we kind of channel that disappointment in some, sort of productive way and, feel those feelings and process them as we need to, but then say, okay, what can we do to help people who are maybe in a worse situation than I am? How can I be a positive impact in this really strange time that we're all living through? So a question from a graduate. I have a BA in political science and a BA in philosophy, class of 2019. I dropped out of law school right before COVID. Does Penn State have any program or counselors to help me reinvent myself and to help me figure out what my best career option is now? So I'll answer that one. I would strongly encourage you to look at the Alumni Career Services website and reach out to them and familiarize yourself with the resources that they have, but definitely reach out to the staff there for some assistance. So the second part of this question is now a better time to enroll in classes than searching for a job if I think I'm interested in psychology as a career later on? Or perhaps classes on entrepreneurship if I'm not sure I want a 9-to-5 office job?
So I will say from an economic standpoint, we usually, this is way different, but usually you do see enrollments going up during a recessionary period because the opportunity cost of going to start taking classes or entering into a new field is a lot lower because what you're giving up is just not working. Whereas if the economy is booming, going back to school, you're giving up your job. Mm-hmm. So usually you do see a lot of people going back into schooling during these recessionary periods. Now, that's a lot of people don't want to do online learning, and that might be going on for a while. So you have to kind of take that into consideration as well. I've also done a lot of stuff with entrepreneurship, and I would not, if you're interested in that path, there's a program through Penn State that's called Invent Penn State, and they have different accelerator programs, and they're called launch boxes. So we have a launch box here in State College, and I think 19 of the Commonwealth campuses have one there too. So if you just go to, just Google Invent Penn State, and you'll see information on how Penn State is really helping with the entrepreneurial community. And there's lots of free resources there as well. So those would be the two things that I would mention.
Yeah, and I would say with regard to psychology, the field is still good with regard to jobs, but it's really at the master's and doctoral level. And I would shadow, we shadow students even beginning in high school that say, I think I want to be a neuropsychologist or clinical psychologist. And we say, come in for a day and hang out, go to a hospital and hang out, go to a trauma center and shadow. I think that's good before you make a commitment. There are a number of online programs. The APA publishes a graduate student guide that ranks those programs. My daughter's in a doctoral program now, and she's online, and it's going pretty well, actually. They have a good learning community together. She has good touch with her professors. So I think it's still a good career path, but it needs to be thought through on the front end.
And I would say too, it sounds like you're thinking about maybe two very different paths, and it could be a really good time to do some networking, talk to people who maybe done some entrepreneurial ventures and try to understand what that might look like for you and whether that's a comfortable fit. And the same as Vince said with psychology, try to talk to people who do different kinds of things within that broad umbrella of psychology to figure out, does a master's in social work make sense for you? Do you want to do, a doctoral degree and be a clinical psychologist? There are lots of different variations. And so sometimes for students, just getting some experience with shadowing or doing informational interviews, or even working with local social service agencies to try to get a little bit of that experience of maybe working on a hotline or taking advantage of that training will help you to figure out if that's the right path for you. And I do think my colleagues in Alumni Career Services can help you kind of explore some of those options as well. Here's one I think that could be for you, James. How should students navigate the housing market after graduating in these conditions? Is there any advice on negotiating brokerage fees, rent, or deposits?
That is a good question. So I don't foresee the housing market at this point really taking off in one direction or the other. Unless it starts to get hit where people are becoming late on their mortgage payments and foreclosures start to happen, I foresee the government stepping in a little more and delaying that at least until the economy is back on its feet a little bit. We've already seen here in State College, there's no evictions being allowed, but it's not that you don't have to pay that stuff. It's just that it's being pushed back. And if I were to guess, the mortgage companies, I've already gotten a couple of emails from my mortgage company asking, like, is there anything that needs to be done? They're willing to delay some payments. They're willing to cut a month out and add it in the future. So I don't foresee any sort of issues bubbling up right now, but could I see that in 6 to 12 months when all these payments are starting to come due and the economy hasn't fully recovered? Possibly. So the idea that getting in right now or getting out right now is a big deal, I wouldn't say. It doesn't hurt to have a discussion with, if you're deciding to rent, if you're going somewhere you're renting, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have that discussion and maybe try and negotiate, because a lot of these landlords are, they're not getting that revenue in that they were expecting. So could you go to a place, and if you have a job and it's pretty secure, and let's say the rent was going to be $2,000 a month, maybe you say, hey, I'll sign a 2-year lease instead of a 1-year lease if you let me pay $1,800 a month or $1,900 a month or whatever. There's a possibility that they're going to take that guaranteed money in for a longer time. And so you'll save a little bit of money here and there. I don't think you're going to be able to go into a place and be like, hey, it's normally $2,000. I'll give you $500 a month to live here. I don't think that's going to happen. But if you have a secure job and that you're going to be able to be in a place for longer than maybe the initial year or 18 months that you might sign an initial lease, I think there's some wiggle room there that you wouldn't have seen when the economy was booming and the housing market was booming. That's what I would think.
Okay. So this is another one for you, James. How does this period of time compare to the 2008 recession? Similarities and differences in how you see our economy recovering and working through this crisis?
That's a great question. It's very different. So the 2007 to 2009 recession was, the economy itself was not on solid ground. It was all through the financial sector, and there were lots of cracks in the base of the economy. So the complete meltdown was due to the financial sector. You know, right now in this recession, it's so different because 2 months ago, our unemployment rate was at 3.5%, which was historically one of the lowest unemployment rates we've seen, you know, since the 1960s. We were seeing historic job growth in length. So the private sector had added jobs for over 10 years, every single month without a single blip. Like that was incredible. The labor market was really strong. Consumer confidence was really strong. Investor confidence was really strong. So the economy was really, really strong until we had this disaster. So you can think about it as like everything's going well, and then a tornado rips through a small town, right? And it destroys a ton of stuff, and then like everything was great, and so the tornado's gone, you rebuild, and it kind of comes right back. This is a natural disaster, only it was a global natural disaster. We hope that this natural disaster doesn't take too long to take its course, because then the economy, we should see it rebound relatively quickly. And I'm still optimistic that the rebound will be much faster than the most recent recession. However, every day, you know, every month that it goes on, it's very bad for the labor market. So there's a term in economics, we call it, it's hysteresis. It's a weird word. I don't know why it's called that. The idea behind it is every month that somebody is unemployed, they lose a little bit of their skills, they lose a bit of their contacts, and they just get further and further away from their previous employment, and that hurts them getting future employment. So, you know, if people are out for a month or 2 or 3 months, that's not going to be too big of a deal to get them back and running and to get the factories going and everything going back. But if this drags out to 6 months or 7 months or 8 months, then I think we have a completely different picture. Those are the main differences in the overall recession. Is we were good to start with, which is a great thing. Like if this were to have hit, you know, in 2010 or 2011, like where we haven't had the momentum that we had, I think it would have, you know, been twice as bad. And so the United States, we're lucky in that sense that we are in that position, because not every country did have as solid of an economy that we had.
Great. So this one could be for anyone. Now that we're in this sort of virtual space and everybody's getting much more comfortable and used to using Zoom and other virtual platforms, what tips do you have for virtual interviewing and virtual networking?
I'll just say I was doing a lecture last night on Zoom for about 40 people, and in preparation for the lecture, a woman had sent me an article from the New York Times about how to do a good video. And it was really, really helpful, except it didn't say be 25 years old, which would have been a lot better way to do it. But I'll post that link because I really think it was an article published about 2 weeks ago in the Times. So I'll send that to Lauren or Kristen.
And from a virtual interview standpoint, I would say, you know, you should always still dress professionally. It doesn't matter that it's on video. You still want to look professional. I would say sit somewhere where there aren't going to be a lot of distractions, where you have good lighting. I've done so many virtual interviews where the person was sitting in the dark and I could barely see them, and I didn't even know when they were answering the questions, except I had to just listen to this sort of, you know, amoeba in the background. So, you know, I know it seems a little weird, but, you know, make sure that your technology works. If you want to practice, you know, clicking on, you know, whatever link they've sent you, depending on what platform they're using, you know, and just make sure that, you know, everything seems situated and comfortable before you get started. But I do a little dry run beforehand.
Yeah, and I would say just remember that most of the people interviewing you don't have TikTok or Instagram. So you know what those things look like. And so you're very comfortable with that video and visual format. And I know folks from my generation, we're not so comfortable with that. That's new to us. So it's a different look and a different feel.
And I'll give a plug for Penn State's Career Services and Bank of America. They have on their website information about their mock interview program, and they will do practice interviews with you for in person and under normal circumstances. But they're also doing practice interviews for video interviews and for phone interviews. So there are chances for you to get a little bit of experience with that. Certainly you can do it with your friends or your family if you want to test out the technology and make sure it's working. There also is a resource on Career Services website called Interview Stream, where it's a video interview where you can schedule a couple of questions and it'll give you a certain period of time to answer each of those questions. And that's become much more common with employers. They'll send you a link and you can do those whenever you want. It's a little bit easier in terms of your time, but it can be beneficial to have a little bit of practice with that. And again, it might seem a little strange at first to be practicing answering these interview questions and then watching yourself answering the interview questions, but it's like any other skill. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it, the more comfortable you'll get at it. So a question for you, Vince. How much does mindset affect how a person approaches a situation like the current one? Is it better to set specific goals for myself and find ways to work toward them, or relax and wait for things to get better?
Now, I'm not a big on relax and wait for things to get better. I like the idea of setting goals. Mindset comes from Carol Dweck's research. I think he's at Stanford now. And, her early experiments were to put kids in two different math classes and tell one set of kids, you're going to be great math students, and tell the other set of kids, you're going to be okay math students. They were divided equally. Those that were told that had the mindset actually became better math students. So I think maintaining a positive expectation, again, taking some reasonable risks, and whatever career path or educational path you were on, stay on it. Don't vary the course, just find a different way to achieve it. So mindset, very important. Read some of Carol Dweck's work if you get a chance.
All right, so I see we just have a few more minutes left. So I wanted to ask if any of you have any kind of final thoughts you want to share with our attendees tonight.
I guess I'll just reiterate that you're not alone, and so feel free to reach out to people that are in your network that you're close with, or even if you don't feel that close with and you're just like, I need someone to talk this through. I'll let you know right now, I have about 400 students, and I'm used to having students come into my office hours, and that's not happening virtually. So sending an email to faculty members that you've worked with before, asking them questions, like, we're all hungry for the personal connection as well. So don't feel like you're a burden on other people. Reach out and ask for help if you need it.
Yeah, and I would add to that, use Penn State's resources. I mean, 100,000 alumni are out there, and they're all over the region, and they're accessible and they're motivated, and use those connections. If it's a career question, if it's a mental health question, if it's an internship question, use the network. Part of what you buy with a Penn State education is access to a phenomenal network.
For sure. And I'll just add to both what James and Vince said. Don't sit at home and be alone. Connect with people and take advantage of the time that you have, not just to do things for your resume, but to do fun things too. There's a lot of things, there may be books that you haven't been able to read because you were busy, reading books for school, or, anything that you want to do. I mean, there's so many fitness classes online. My CrossFit is doing Zoom, CrossFit, which is a little weird, but, we do it and it's fun to see everybody. So just try to stay connected. And I had let Susan and the rest of the team know that she is welcome to share my email contact information if any of you want to reach out to me after we conclude this evening, or in the coming weeks. Please feel free. I'm happy to try to answer questions about career path or training and development or recruiting or interviewing or finding a job. I'll do whatever I can to help you.
Yeah, I'm available as well, and there are 201 episodes of The Office, so there's a little bit of time for you right there.
And that's the thing that we really wanted to accomplish tonight. So I want to say thank you to Vince and Wendy and James for taking the time to talk with us. And we just really did want to emphasize to students that there is a network of people here willing and ready to support you. It is a really strange time for everyone, but we know that you have a great education and we want to still help you and support you in moving forward in your career goals. And so please don't hesitate to reach out. For the Career Enrichment Network team, you can always book appointments through your Nittany Lion Careers account. If you have questions about how to do that, just reach out to us through our email, which is lanetwork@psu.edu. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we do have a resource page, a website that Kirsten has created. So that's on your screens right now. And we'll put a recording of tonight's session there, but there's information for our panelists and their LinkedIn profiles, so you can connect with them through there if you would like. And then a lot of different resources, and we'll just keep adding to that resource list. Everything from, financial literacy office on Penn State's campus, if you're having some of those financial questions, to CAPS, if you want to reach out and get some resources related to, mental health and how to manage stress. And then of course, all of the career planning resources. So I want to say thanks for joining us tonight. And please don't hesitate to get in touch if any of us can be of help to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.